This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Recording in progress.
Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Baruch Haba. Nice to see everybody. Okay, we have the great zechus to try to dig in to two Taisus today on two of the most Lomdus Shabbat and Shas. Moreover, these are probably two of the most Lomdus Taisus and Shas. If you had to make like a list of top 10 Taisus that you should know, these might be. I think they would likely be in on the list. The first one we're going to learn on Iyun Hey Amud Beis. We know throughout Masechta Kesuvos there's a machlokes between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. What takes precedence, Chezkas Haguf or Chezkas Mammon? Rabbi Yeshua says Chezkas Mammon. You leave money where it is, despite the fact that Chezkas Haguf says if you have a Shaila was a woman, a Basula or a Be'ula, we said she became a Be'ula at the last possible time, and she was born a Basula. So let's assume that if her status changed, it happened at the last possible time. So Rabbi Gamliel says if a woman says that it happened after Erisin, she's believed. However, Rabbi Yeshua says Eloi mi pia anu chayin, and she's trying to take money out of the husband's reshus. Chezkas Mammon reigns supreme. So you might mistakenly think that Rabbi Yeshua doesn't hold of Chezkas Haguf. So Rava said about 10 lines from the top on Iyun Hey Amud Beis, Amar Rava, Loi tema Rabbi Yeshua Loi azal basar chazaka degufa klal. Don't say that Rabbi Yeshua doesn't follow Chezkas Haguf at all. Ela ki Loi azal Rabbi Yeshua basar chazaka degufa. When does Rabbi Yeshua not follow Chezkas Haguf? Heicha deika chazaka demamayna. That's if there's Chezkas Mammon against it. But heicha deleka chazaka demamayna. If there is no Chezkas Mammon, azal Rabbi Yeshua basar chazaka degufa. And the Gemara brings a raya that Rabbi Yeshua follows Chezkas Haguf. The Tanya, we know when it comes to tzaras, if the spot comes before the hair, it's tameh. If the hair comes before the spot, it's tahar. The Gemara says in Bahera is koydem l'ser lavan tameh. The spot comes first tameh. M'ser lavan koydem l'her is tahar. Safek is tameh, but safek is tameh. Rabbi Yeshua Omer keha. Literally, it's dull. My keha. Amar Rabba keha tahar. It's tahar. Safek is tahar. Why is safek tahar? Because you're mesupik whether this woman is a Mitzayra or not. Chezkas Haguf says that she was born not a Mitzayra. We should assume she's not a Mitzayra. So we see that Rabbi Yeshua follows Chezkas Haguf. Taisus seems to be bothered. Why would anybody ever say that Rabbi Yeshua doesn't follow Chezkas Haguf? Isn't it obvious that if there's no Chezkas Mammon, you would follow Chezkas Haguf? What, Rabbi Yeshua doesn't hold of Chazaka? I need Rava to say Rabbi Yeshua holds of Chazaka, and the only reason he doesn't here is because he holds Chezkas Mammon is stronger? Why would I think that Rabbi Yeshua does not follow Chezkas Haguf if there's no Chezkas Mammon? So let's see Taisus. Let us see Taisus. I have to resend it. Because Taisus has a chidush where the Gemara's point is not that Rabbi Yeshua holds of Chezkas Haguf, but rather Rabbi Yeshua holds of Chezkas Haguf against other Chazakais, but not Chezkas Mammon. And we will see that. Let's see. If it came in. Okay. Here it is. Okay. Taisus. Make it bigger. Nice and big. Perush. Says Taisus. When the Gemara says Rabbi Yeshua holds of Chezkas Haguf, what that means is Afagav de'ika chazaka acharas. Even though there is another chazaka. For example, Keneged Chezkas Haguf. Really? What chazaka is there in our Mishnah against Chezkas Haguf? Ki hacha debelav Chezkas Mammon. Aside from Chezkas Mammon, yesh chazaka acharas. namely, the Hamidena b'Chezkas Penuya. Chezkas Haguf says that if their mumin, or if she was violated, happened at the last possible time. But what about another chazaka? Chazaka is a Chezkas Hadin, that she was born unmarried. So let's assume that she remained unmarried. The point of Rava is not that Rabbi Yeshua holds of Chezkas Haguf against the nothing. Of course, Rabbi Yeshua holds of Chezkas Haguf. The point is that if it's not for Chezkas Mamoin, Chezkas Haguf would destroy the other chazaka, namely the Hamidenu b'Chezkas Pnuya. Why? The Dafka ki ika Chezkas Mamoin. Dafka when there's Chezkas Mamoin, layalim alei Chezkas Haguf keneged Chezkas Mamoin. Chezkas Haguf is not strong against Chezkas Mamoin. Aval heicha deleka Chezkas Mamoin, there's no Chezkas Mamoin. Alim alei Chezkas Haguf mishar chazakais. The ileka shum chazaka acheres kenegda. Because, says Tosfos, how do I know what the Gemara means? Is that Chezkas Haguf would destroy Chezkas Pnuya. Maybe it means Chezkas Haguf would just work. No. Says Tosfos, the Ileka Shum Chazaka Cheres, if there's no other Chazaka, Kenegda, Ma Yasal Ashmeinan. What would the Gemara, what would Rava come to teach us? Pshita, the Azal Basar Chezkas Haguf. Of course you follow Chezkas Haguf. Why? Kiven de Ein Davar Makrisha. Nothing contradicts it. Okay? So meaning it's pashut that Rabbi Yeshua holds of Chezkas Haguf. The Chidush of Rava is it's only Chezkas Hamamoin that nullifies Chezkas Haguf. But Chezkas Haguf would destroy other Chazakas, Kivan the Ein Dar Machisha. So you'll ask, and what about in the case that we prove Rava's din from, namely in the case of Tsaras? Right? We're proving from Tsaras that we follow Chezkas Haguf. But there the Chezkas Haguf is not fighting any other Chazaka. So, actually for that you have to see another Tosfos. This is also one of Mamish, the classic Tosfos in Shas, where this Tosfos asks, he quotes the Kasha Rabbeinu Tam. We know that by Tsaras, if you're Mesupik what came first, the Rabbanon say, Tameh. Hiksha Rabbeinu Tam, my time of the Rabbanon, the Amrinon Tameh. Amai lo yazlina basar chazaka. Da amrina beparakama dechulin. Mina ha milsa da amar Rabbanon. Uki milsa basar chazaka. Umaisi lo mikra. Why would the Rabbanon not follow Chezkas Haguf? So Rabbeinu Tam says a whopper. And you need to know this Rabbeinu Tam to understand the first Tosfos. Then the case of Tsaras, there is a chazaka against it. While the Chezkas Haguf says that she was born without Tsaras, so let's assume she's not the person's not a Mitzaira. Says Rabbeinu Tam, you know what we're talking about over here? That before this nega, this person had a different nega. So they were bechezkas tuma. So you're debating what came first, the spot or the hair, the spot or the hair. So Rabbi Yeshua says, well, we'll follow Chezkas Haguf. Now we're learning in the middle of the first Tosfos that doesn't everyone hold of Chezkas Haguf? And the point is that Chezkas Haguf even overcomes other Chazakos. So Tosfos says the Rabbanon here hold Tameh because against the Chezkas Haguf that says that she remains not a Mitzaira, there's a Chezkas Tuma that she is a Mitzaira. Why? Because Hacha b'may askina, what are we talking about her? We're talking about Kishanizgak l'Tuma, where she already had, he had another nega. Shahaya by nega echad, shchin, ay michva, kaidem. She had a boil or a burn before. Vahaya muchla mimenu, you were mitzar muchla from it. V'kaidem shenetaher, and before becoming purified, nolad ba safek. A safek was born. V'achar shenitter min arishain, and after they became tahar from the first, lo nishar by ela safek zat. You were only left with this safek. Okay, so basically, this is consistent with the Tosfos we're middle of learning, that the Chidush of Rava is that Rabbi Yeshua follows Chezkas Haguf against other Chazakas. What other Chazaka is there in the Mishnah? Chezkas Penuya. That's even though Chezkas Haguf says that the mum happened at the latest possible time, the Chazaka that she's a Penuya says that it happened earlier in order for her to retain her status of being a single woman. Okay. Now, let's go back to the first Taisus. Mihu Temalari. Okay. The Ri has the following tema. Now that we've set up the Sugya, that Rava is saying, Rabbi Shua follows Chezkas Haguf, even against other Chazakos. And what other Chazaka is there? In the Mishnah there's Chezkas Pnuya. By Tsaras there's Chezkas Tuma. Now here's a Pella, because that means, think about it, Rabbi Yeshua would have followed Chezkas Haguf if not for the fact that there's Chezkas Mamain, but at the end of the day he follows Chezkas Mamain, and by the way, the Chezkas Mamain is being supported by Chezkas Pnuya. Okay. You ready? This is the $1 million question. How could you say that had it not been for Chezkas Mammon over here, Rabbi Shua would follow Chezkas Haguf, you would follow Chezkas Haguf, but it's 1 against 2. How so? Number 1, the Islam Lameimar Hamidana b'Chezkas Pnuya. We should say, retain her in her status of being single. V'chiteiman, if you're going to say, Adarabba Hamid Oisa b'Chezkas Shlema, if you're going to say, no, use Chezkas Haguf, and she's a Basula. V'hashdu de Nasamum. But against the Chezkas Haguf, there's something called Harei Mum Lefanecha. What do you mean Chezkas Haguf? Chezkas Haguf, when it's in full force, is you don't know if her body has changed. Chezkas Haguf says we should assume it didn't change. But here we know it changed. She has a mum. Now the question is, when did the mum happen? So shooting the Chezkas Haguf in the foot is Harei Mum Lefanecha. So it's 2 against 1. How could you say, had it not been for Chezkas Mama and Rabbi Shua would follow Chezkas Haguf, but it's 1 against 2. What's the 1 against 2? Chezkas Haguf is fighting Chezkas Pnuya and Harei Mum Lefanecha. Where do we ever get this thing that Harei Mum Lefanecha makes it 1 against 2? V'chi tema says Tosfos T'chi Haygavna Chashvina and Tartil Reyos. Because this is considered to the detriment, where Gabe Mikvah, by Mikvah Shenimdad V'Nimtza Chaser, that's measured and it's found to be missing. Da'amrina and Kol Taroi Shenasu Al Gabav, we say anything that was tar, that was immersed in the Mikvah, L'mafreya Ben Rosh Hashanah Ben Rosh Hashanah Tmeos. Why? Because on the one hand, Chezkas Haguf says the mikvah was kosher for the longest possible time, and if it became possible, it became possible recently. You have a Chezkas Haguf. Why? We say Mishum de'ikal ameimer hamed tamei al Chezkasai. The item that was immersed, let it retain its status of being tamei. Ve'emer loy tava, and say the teal is no good. V'chitem, if you're going to say hamed mikvah al Chezkasai, if you're going to say use the Chezkas Hagufa, the mikvah, that it was good. Ve'emer loy chaser, and say it was not missing. Hari chaser l'fanecha, you see it is missing. Marav Aboisai, you ready? Listen to this kasha. The halacha is, you have a guy, he's tamei. He immersed in a mikvah. He measured it last week, it was good, he immersed. Comes out of the mikvah is 39 sa. Tamei or tahar? Halacha is he's tamei. Why? Because he has a chezkas tuma. Yeah, but the mikvah has a chezkas haguf, so why don't we say it's missing water, it happened after he immersed? No, but the chezkas haguf is impugned, is weakened. How is it weakened? Because you measured it and you see it's missing. So if it's missing, while Chezkas Haguf says that it happened at the last possible time, Harei Chasar Lefanecha says the Chezkas Haguf is weakened. So we tag team Chezkas Tuma and Harei Chasar Lefanecha against the Chezkas Haguf of the mikvah. So Frek Tosfos, just like we tag team Chezkas Haguf, Chezkas Tuma and Harei Chasar Lefanecha against the mikvah, Chezkas Haguf of the mikvah, we tag team the Chezkas Tuma and Harei Chasar Lefanecha against the mikvah. Then how could the Gemara say that had it not been for Chezkas Mamain, you would have followed the Chezkas Haguf of the woman? But why don't we tag team her Chezkas Pnuya and Harei Mum Lefanecha?
But shouldn't Harei Mum Lefanecha depend on where it was found, whether it was B'beis Aviyah or B'beis Bala?
Maybe not.
I mean, it sounds to me similar to Kan Nimtzu Kan Hayu.
The difference between Kan Nimtzu Kan Hayu and Harei Mum Lefanecha is very subtle, but it's clear. Kan Nimtzu Kan Hayu says, if it was found in a domain, then that mum existed in that domain at all times. Harei Chasar Lefanecha says, don't you tell me that this person was born without an issue, because you see the issue in front of you, and therefore you cannot. And therefore, that says it weakens the Chezkas Haguf, similar to Kan Nimtzu Kan Hayu. Kan Nimtzu Kan Hayu only weakens it in that domain, but Harei Chasar Lefanecha weakens it. Period. Where it could even say it existed before. So Kan Nimtzu Kan Hayu is germane to that rishus. Harei Chasar Lefanecha is a buster of Chezkas Haguf. Now, I want to point out a very important question on Tosfos. You hear this kasha of Tosfos? It's worthwhile coming for your soul to come down from under the Kisei HaKavod to hear this kasha of Tosfos. It's called tag team chazaka. We see by mikvah that if somebody was tamei and now there's a question in the mikvah, his Chezkas Tuma tag teams with the Harei Chasar Lefanecha. So why don't we say the same thing in Rabbi Yehoshua, that let the Chezkas Pnuya tag team with Harei Mum Lefanecha? I would ask on Tosfos a very pashut kasha. What in the world does this have to do with Rabbi Yeshua? Rabbi Gamliel follows Chezkas Haguf. Why does Rabbi Gamliel follow Chezkas Haguf? But against the Chezkas Haguf, you have Chezkas Penuya, and you have Harei Mum Lefanecha. So why are we asking on what Rava says Rabbi Yehoshua would have said had it not be for Chezkas Mamain? Rabbi Gamliel follows Chezkas Haguf even with Chezkas Mamain. You could ask Rabbi Gamliel, how could he follow Chezkas Haguf? It's 1 against 3. Chezkas Mamain, Chezkas Pnuya, Harei Mum Lefanecha. The kasha Tosfos is asking on Rabbi Yehoshua, in the way Rava learns Rabbi Yehoshua, you could ask on Ram Gamliel also. It's just in Ram Gamliel. It seems that Ram Gamliel holds Chezkas Mamain is nothing in the face of Chezkas Haguf. So by the same token, you could say he holds Chezkas Penuya is the same thing, is nothing b'makom Chezkas Haguf. Why would that be different than Chezkas Tuma? Not sure. Look at Tosfos' answer. Ready for Tosfos' answer? Venira l'Rashba. By the way, this Rashba is not the Rashba. This is one of the Balei HaTosfos. Venira l'Rashba. The Chezkas Penuya loy chashiva klal chazaka legabe Chezkas Haguf. Chezkas Penuya is nothing b'makom Chezkas Haguf. That Chezkas Tuma is a force against the Chezkas Haguf of the mikvah, And therefore the Chezkas Tuma joins up with Harei Chasar Lefanecha. Chezkas Penuya is nothing b'makam Chezkas Haguf. Why? That's Tosfos. Okay, that's the starting point. Now we come to another basic question, but you'll see we're going to come back to this. Bottom line is, what's Tosfos saying? That had it not be for Chezkas Mamain, Chezkas Haguf would destroy Chezkas Pnuya. Tosfos says, but it's 1 against 2. No! Chezkas Haguf is so strong, Chezkas Pnuya is blown out of the waters. Why? Why is Chezkas Haguf any stronger than any other Chazaka? That had it not been for Chezkas Mammon, Chezkas Haguf would beat Chezkas Pnuya. Number 2, even though it's 1 against 2, Tosfos says it's not 1 against 2, because the Chezkas Haguf destroys the Chezkas Pnuya that it doesn't exist. Rabbi Elchanan asks, "V'nei l'chayr ina muvan. Meisa tam yesh l'chalek ben Chezkas Haguf l'shar chazakos. Dehakulu mechad kras, and they're all learned out of one pasuk in Chulin. Ubishlama, you have a trey kroy. If it would be learned out from 2 psukim, efshir shechalukim medina, you could say they have different dinim. Kamay roiv v'karoiv, ayruba v'chazaka. Avakivan deleka alachad kraf. There's only one pasuk. Ich efshir l'chalek hadin l'chatzan. How could you divide the din in half? Says Rabbi Elchanan, very important idea. What is the logic of Chazaka? Chazaka says things didn't change, status quo. So what is a more compelling status quo? That a physical thing didn't change, or that a din didn't change? What's more of a force of a status quo? That a person's body remained the way it was created? Or that a marital status didn't change, or a halachic status of Tumah V'Tara didn't change? It's much harder to change something physically than to change something in Lomdus. Says Rabbi Elchanan ben Dehine Ikar din Chazaka hu laimar. The principle of Chazaka is to say Shadavar lo nishtanu mikafi shahaya kaidim shenad hasafik, that the matter didn't change from what it was before the suffix was noilad. Umizen nilmaid. And from here we could learn, even if it did change, you just have a doubt, did it change a lot or a little? It's reasonable to assume that it only changed a little, not a lot. That's why Chezkas Haguf is stronger than other chazakos. The shinoi hanasa beguf hadavar, a change, a physical change, who shinoi yoyser gadol mehecha shloi nishtana hadavar rak bedinoi, is a bigger change than if it just changed in halachic status. V'dami k'may hacha chada chazaka v'hachi trei chazaka. It would be similar to if you had 2 chazakas against 1 chazaka, 2 would win. V'chozel lebasar deika din chazaka. This is after the din of chazaka. Loymar shalai nishtana. That says it didn't change. Amrina under trei chazakas adifa mechada. We say 2 is greater than 1. V'chezah aguf adifa mishar chazakas. Here's what Rabbi Elchanan is saying. The Lomdus of chazaka is we should assume something didn't change. And if something did change, it's better to say it changed a little than a lot. So in the barometer of measuring, what is a bigger change? A physical change or a change in din, a status in din? It's a much bigger change to say something changed in physical reality than to say it changed in din. So when you're discussing, on the one hand, we have a question, when she developed the mum, did it happen before or later? We should assume it happened later. A change in her body is a very big change. But a change in whether she's married or not, that's not a big change. You look at a woman before or after she's married, there's no physical difference in her. It's just a change in status. Chezkas Haguf is stronger than other chazakos, because the Lomdus of chazaka is, we should say that if something changed, it happened in the last possible moment, and a Chezkas Haguf, a change in physical reality, is a much more drastic change than a change in spiritual status or halachic status. Okay, and now the moment you've all been waiting for, the Shev Shmaitza. Okay. Learning a Shev Shmaitza, you're a different person. I would say it's like a physical change. Okay? Before and after Shev Shmaitza, it's not like before you were somebody without a Shev Shmaitza, now you're somebody with a Shev Shmaitza. Learning Shev Shmaitza, you're a different Adam. You're a different person. So let's just get the structure first. Structure of Tosfos is, how could Rava have said that had it not been for Chezkas Mamain, Rabbi Shua would follow Chezkas Haguf? Of course you follow Chezkas Haguf. Why wouldn't you? It says Tosfos, because there's a competing Chazaka, Chezkas Penuya. To which Tosfos asks, but then it's 2 against 1. It's Chezkas Penuya and Harei Mum Lefanecha against Chezkas Haguf. To which Tosfos says, Chezkas Penuya against Chezkas Haguf is nothing. We still haven't explained then why is Chezkas Tuma something and Chezkas Penuya not? But let's see the Shmaitza. The Shmaitza quotes Tosfos. Venira l'Rashba. By the way, I guess the main question here is, why by mikvah do we say the Chezkas Tuma is something against the Chezkas Haguf? Why don't we say the same thing? By mikvah, it's not 2 against 1. The Chezkas Tuma is nothing against the Chezkas Haguf. That's what the Shmaitza is going to deal with. The Shmaitza says, a masha midivrayim, it's masha from Tosfos, the kiva the Chezkas Haguf adifa mikol hachazakais. Since Chezkas Haguf is stronger than any chazaka, mishum hachi, afilu chaser lefanecha, even if there's harei mum lefanecha, lo chashiv Chezkas Penuya legaba. The Chezkas Penuya is not chashuv, lemishri al yada tarti l'riusa, to make it 2 against 1. So the Shmaitza asked the following question. We could have asked, so why by mikvah is it 2 against 1? And the Shmaitza is going to deal with mikvah in the last paragraph. I'm going to be brave now. I want to see one more question. The Shmaitza brings in a Gemara in the beginning of Nida, Daf Beis Amud Beis. You have a barrel, v'nimtza chometz, a barrel that became vinegar. V'amru sham, we say over there, kol shloisha yom rishayim vadai. The first 3 days, it was wine. Mikan ve'elach safek. From the 3rd day on, it's a safek. Uparch maishna gabe mikvah dehavile vadai. Why by mikvah do we say it's definitely no good? Umaskinan chavis mani Rab Shimon. V'hasam gabe chavis amrinan hamed tevel al cheskasai. V'lay amrinan hamed yayin al cheskasai. Mishum dehavile tarti l'riusa. So the case is like this. You have a barrel. It's now vinegar. You took off truma from the barrel to be. You took off truma from that barrel to be able to be mafresh for other barrels. So you were mafresh truma, And we say the first 3 days it was definitely yayin, even though there is a Chezkas tevel here. So on the one hand, you have a Chezkas tevel, you have chometz lefanecha, but Chezkas Haguf says it was yayin. So you have Chezkas Haguf says it was yayin, and there you're fighting harei chometz lefanecha, and you're fighting Chezkas tevel. So there, even though it's 2 against 1, we say Chezkas Haguf. And the Gemara asks, but how is it different than mikvah? Behasam gabe chavas amrin hemet teva Chezkasai. By chavas we say. So the first 3 days we say it's yayin. From there and on, it's a suffix. It's a suffix. Why by mikvah do we say vadai? So the Gemara says, by chavas amrinan hemed tevel Chezkasai, v'lay amrinan hemed yaina Chezkasai, mishum dehavale tarti l'reyasa. The afagav, the Chezkas tevel, I have a Chezkas Haguf. Chezkas tevel is not a Chezkas Haguf. The gufa la yishtani, ela k'may Chezkas iser, v'Chezkas pnuya, v'ilu hayayin vadai havale Chezkas Haguf. The wine has a Chezkas Haguf. Da yidei shenasa chometz harei yishtani gufa, v'Chezkas Haguf adif, v'lay mahani tarti l'reyasa neged Chezkas Haguf, v'imkein havale liyos vadai truma. It should be vadai truma. So, the Shmaitza is asking from the Gemara in the beginning of Nida, so if you have a barrel, and it's chometz now, so the first 3 days we say vadai, from there on suffix. The halacha is that we say the situation of barrel is going like Reb Shimon, and we say Hamid Tevel al Chezkasai. We're going to use the Chezkas Tevel to say it's not a good Truma, instead of using the Chezkas Haguf to say it is a good Truma. Even though Chezkas Tevel is worse than Chezkas Haguf, because Chezkas Haguf, the body changed. By Yayin, there is a Chezkas Haguf because it became vinegar. The guf of the Yayin changed, and Chezkas Haguf is stronger than Chezkas, a Chazaka of status change. So, nevertheless, the Chezkas halacha that it's the Chazaka of Tevel is actually going to be stronger than the Chezkas Haguf that is Yayin. Okay. Let's put aside this case in Nida for a moment, and let's try to see if we could distinguish between the case of mikvah, where we say that the Chezkas Haguf of the mikvah actually beats. By mikvah we say tarti l'reyasa. We say even though the mikvah has a Chezkas Haguf, the Chezkas Tuma of the person and the Harei Chasar Lefanecha will overcome the Chezkas Haguf of the mikvah. And we don't say that in other words, what's the halacha by mikvah? By mikvah, Taisa says, we say that the person's tameh, because the Chezkas Tuma stands tall to the Chezkas Haguf of the mikvah. So why don't we say the same thing by our Gemara? Why don't we say the Chezkas Penuya stands tall to the Chezkas Haguf of the woman that she was born without mumen? So listen to what the Shmaitza says. Uve mikvah nami. You know what the difference between mikvah and a woman is, the Chezkas Haguf of the mikvah is not that strong. Why? We say by a mikvah that was measured and it was found to be missing. It's two to the detriment. What is it? Chezkas tuma and v'harei chasar lefanecha. You have two problems. Number one, you have chezkas tuma, and number two, it's missing in front of you. You have a chezkas haguf. No, by mikvah you don't really have a full-fledged chezkas haguf. V'lo have a mikvah chezkas haguf. You don't really have a chezkas haguf by mikvah. Kivan deha mikvah lo nishtana gufa. Since the mikvah, its body didn't change. Ela shenechser ma'at mayim mimena. You're just missing a little bit of water. Aval heicha. But in a situation, the chezkas haguf ika. But in a situation where there's chezkas haguf, afilu chasar lefanecha, even though it's missing, laimikri tarti l'reis neged shar chazakais. Listen to this. The distinction between mikvah and a woman who has an issue with mumin is that when you have a woman who is born without mumin, having a mum is such a drastic change in her physical entity that chezkas haguf is so strong that it makes the chezkas pnuya, it makes it disappear. It completely negates it. It completely nullifies it. In the face of a strong chezkas haguf, chezkas pnuya is non-extant. By mikvah also, isn't there a strong chezkas haguf? No. The Shmait says mechadesh that by mikvah, missing a little bit of water is not a real change in the entity of the mikvah. What are you going to say? Well, the mikvah had a chezkas haguf that it wasn't missing any water. Yeah, it had a chezkas haguf that it wasn't missing any water. But missing a little bit of water, even though that little bit of water renders it a pasul mikvah, is not a major change in the physical state of the mikvah. Having a mum is a radical change in the physical reality of a person. Missing a little water is a change, but it's not as much of a change. Again, this only would make sense in the world of Elchanan, that the Lomdus of Chazaka is that we have to assume change did not happen, and if change happened, the smallest amount of change possible happened. So in that world, we could distinguish between a mikvah missing water and a person having a mum. A person having a mum is a radical change in a person's entity. A mikvah missing a little bit of water is not a radical change in the mikvah's entity. It's a change in the mikvah status, but it's not a change in the mikvah's entity. Okay, so going back to Tosfos wanted to know why by mikvah do we say it's tarti? Why by mikvah do we say chada b'makom tarti and not by the woman? See, by the woman it's not chada b'makom tarti because the chezkas pnuya is nothing by legabe the chezkas haguf. Ma'ashein kain by mikvah, the chezkas tuma is something against the chezkas haguf of the mikvah, because the mikvah being missing a little water is not such a radical change in the state of the mikvah. Okay, that will be the first Iyun share. The question is, okay, let's hold it here for stage 1.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.